Hey, we're here with Adam Cohen. Thanks so much for taking the time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Like a Man has been out for a bit now, and I've had a chance to listen to it. It feels like I've been with the record for a really long time because your manager passed it along. And my first impressions were that this was a really important record for you to make, in terms of letting some stuff go, probably. Am I onto something there?
It's an important record for sure. I mean, it's mostly a record I thought I wasn't going to make. Pardon me. It's a collection of songs that constitute my proudest achievement yet. It's also a collection of songs that I hid away over the last 20 years, say.
Yeah.
Because they were two things that I didn't like. One, they weren't commercial enough for my taste. I was aiming for commercial targets that these wouldn't have satisfied.
Yeah.
And B, they bore a resemblance to my father's work too much and too closely. And I wasn't comfortable with that either, not because I was rebelling against that sound, but because I was so preoccupied with trying to get on the radio and, you know, indulge in all the trappings of sex, drugs, and rock and roll.
That's less important now, obviously, with making music, getting on the radio. I mean, it's so hard to do that now that, you know, probably being an artist and being true to the music you make is probably easier to do now than to worry about your next hit on the radio.
I can't worry about that anyway.
Yeah. Let's talk a bit about your father, because I would imagine that growing up around such a prolific writer, that writing is something that you probably learned by osmosis, just by hanging out at home.
It took me a while to get good, despite my exposure to greatness from the beginning.
Yeah.
And if I had a recipe even today to follow to write a great song, I'd follow it every day, but I don't.
Right.
But it definitely helps to know what really good is versus some other things.
Do you work collaboratively at all? Does he see any of your stuff before you put it out? Does he see any of it?
He sees all of it.
Yeah.
Sure. Sure.
And what's that like, to have greatness critiquing your work? I mean,
it's
it must
really
be tough.
good. I like it.
Yeah.
I'm the kind of person who typically, you know, for example, my son, I have a 4-year-old boy.
Right.
And sometimes his mother will say to me, "It's okay, your boy did better than blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah."
Yeah.
And that just never works with me as an argument.
Right.
You know, I don't care who he's better than. I want to know who's better than him and what we can do to have him climb up.
Right.
And that's just the way I'm wired.
Yeah.
So, you know, me being better than anybody else is not my interest. My interest is, how can I be as good as the best stuff out there? That's always how I've tried. Even when I was chasing pop, I was trying to chase what I thought of as the best pop. It just so happens to be I wasn't that great at it.
Well, you had two songs.
I had a couple of I had a string of little hits.
Yeah.
And
I remember Eleanor.
Eleanor was fun. I had a couple. I had Cryophilia. That was a nice one
Yeah.
too. You know, I mean, I did it.
Right.
I just didn't do it at the highest level, and it's such a relief to not be doing that anymore. But in terms of the pressure that you're talking about, which is, you know, is my father's great body of work and excellence intimidating to me? No, it's the contrary. It's aspirational.
Right. Like a Man was the title that he actually, I mean, you had a song on the record, but as the story goes, you dropped the record off at his home for him to listen to.
Yes.
Tell us a bit about that story, because I read about it, and it would sound way better coming from you than me repeating the story.
Well, basically, I dropped the record off at his doorstep, but he caught me red-handed, and he invited me in. I begged him not to play the record while I was there. I didn't want to have audience with him. I simply wanted to drop the record off.
Right.
He was familiar with all the songs for many years, but he certainly hadn't heard the record yet.
Right.
And his review was glowing and deeply, deeply satisfying. And 2 of the songs on the record were his favorites, and he refers to them as world-class love songs, which coming from him is absolutely
pretty cool.
Wonderful. And Like a Man stood out to him as a song that should be the title of the record.
Like Ex-Girlfriends, the Low Millions record. I mean, there's a lot of personal tale of give and take and relationships and everything else. Is that, and it's so honest. Is that, I guess, what a songwriter is all about? Is being honest and being able to tell stories that you've actually lived through? Or
I really don't have an answer on that, because not only is it personal, from one person to the next, but it's also temporal, meaning, you know, what's true about how I feel or how anybody feels at one point shouldn't be held against them for when they feel a different truth later on.
Right.
In my personal experience, I've been moved by absolute goo-goo gaga songs where there is no real lyric.
Right.
And I've been moved by someone's gut-wrenching truth. So I wouldn't assign a formula or a rule or a criteria for what is it or isn't a good song.
Yeah.
You know, and as I say, if I had a recipe, I'd be following it. I don't.
You're touring the record now. You were over in Europe for a bit, and you're going to do some Canadian dates. I think February 11th, you're back here in Toronto at the Mod Club.
Sounds good to me.
And is that the goal? Is the goal to tour this record and then potentially make a new record in a year or so? I mean, are you constantly writing? Is that something that's...
No, I don't write at all.
Right.
I'm an extremely slow writer. I hope my management is paying attention. The good news is there's work before me, and I have a record that I'm being faithful to. I'm growing as a performer. I'm learning stuff still. If this runs its course, I know how to make records, and I've found my voice.
Right.
So theoretically, it shouldn't be torturous or too difficult to make a record. Identifying the songs, I can either draw from a very small amount of older songs that I still think are great that could very well have been on this record. But to tell you the truth, I feel like we're talking about me stepping out on a marriage. You know, I'm married to this project.
Right.
And you're talking to me about a divorce and a new chick.
So you're going to live with this chick for a bit.
As appetizing as that is, I have some work to do. With this woman.
Well, I think this woman's a beautiful woman.
Thank you.
And I wish you well with the record and with your tour and continued success. I mean, I know you've been at this for a while.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Very kind of you.
Cheers.
Thanks for having me.